Hello and welcome to the Sparkling Autos YouTube channel. This episode is all about the decontamination process, which is removing those ingrained particles that the normal safe contact wash just isn't quite aggressive enough to do. Things like road tar, microscopic foliage from the brake pads, and as you've just heard in the bonnet, some unexpected contamination which isn't even road related, but more on that later in the video, so stay tuned. For now though, we'll begin with the tar spots, and as mentioned in the first two parts of this series, I'm not reviewing any of the products here, but I will explain what I'm using. So I decided to use two different tar and glue removers, just to compare the strengths and weaknesses. On one half I'm using Koch Chemie EU, and on the other I used Garage Therapy's Zero Tar and Glue. Not only will I be using them to remove tar spots from the paintwork, but also try both products on the leftover adhesive from the sticky number plate pads. I didn't use the traditional popular method of loading up a cotton pad with product and leaving it on there, which is arguably the most efficient way to do this, because I wanted to see if there was any difference in the way these two products worked. Using the Koch Chemie product first then, and when I gave the glue residue a few sprays and left it for 30 seconds or so, you can see it did start to come off reasonably well, but once that top layer was removed, I was still having to do quite a bit of rubbing and even use an extra spray or two of the product just to get those last few bits off as well. So for the next pad, I wanted to see just how much more effective it would be to use a similar amount of product, only this time left it on for a minute or so longer, and even held a section of the cloth dampened with the product onto the affected area. Then after around 90 seconds real time, I wiped the residue away with absolute ease. I couldn't really expect any more from an adhesive remover, and I think if this stuff were any stronger, it'd probably take the paint off with it. And finally for the Koch Chemie side, there were a few small tar spots which, as expected, it removed with no issues. In fact, the only negative I have about this product is arguably a side effect of its strength, and that's the strong solvent smell. Put it this way, you wouldn't want to be using this stuff indoors. Repeating the same process on the opposite sides of the car, only this time using Garage Therapy Zero Tar and Glue. And in contrast to the Koch Chemie product, this one doesn't actually smell too bad for a tar and glue remover. Don't get me wrong, it's not going to invoke any childhood sweet shop memories, but it doesn't have that overpowering solvent smell that the Koch Chemie one has. That being said, even when left to dwell for a minute, it didn't remove the adhesive pad with quite the same ease as the Koch Chemie product. Although there wasn't a huge difference, it just needed a little more effort. It still did the job that was asked, and had I used the cotton pad method, I doubt there would have been any difference in the results. And again, on the adhesive remains of the middle sticky pad, the GT product just required a little more effort than its German counterpart on this particular part of the process. As before, there wasn't a huge difference, and it was still able to do the job within a couple of minutes. And as you can see, I got there in the end. So now we'll take a quick look at how this tar and glue remover deals with the actual tar spots. And you can easily see here the effect it's had just by being allowed to dwell for a few minutes, and with a quick wipe over it, the tar spots are gone. So based on all of this, if I were to compare the two, I'd say the GT is perfect for maintenance and the Koch Chemie product for when you're in a bit of trouble. On now then to the next step. Foliage remover time now, and again using two different products, in fact two very different products that both work incredibly well in their own way. The second one you'll undoubtedly be very familiar with, but this first one may be new to some of you. It's from a brand I've featured a lot on the channel and one which never fails to impress me. This is a product called Purge from the recently renamed Anachem Automotive, whom you may have heard me previously refer to as Anachem Automotive. And on the other side, like I said, a product most of you will be very familiar with, and that's Bilthamber's Corosol. Again, this is a product I've been using for years, and one I tend to refer to when testing other foliage removers, largely because of its incredibly fast reaction time. Whether that's important to you or not is a personal preference, as fast reacting doesn't necessarily mean it's a better product, but it does give a valuable visual indicator of the product's effectiveness, and I can also say from experience that Corosol is an extremely effective foliage remover. For For this part, I've virtually gone straight down the middle of the car, doing one half including the wheels with each product. As with the tar and glue stage, this isn't a direct comparison to find a winner. I'm simply using two products I enjoy using and looking at the differences in how they work. Looking at Purge first, and I will say that it is a bit of an unusual product. Unlike most products dedicated to this particular stage in the process, which are specifically designed either as foliage removers or reactive wheel cleaners, this is sold under the guise of both, and I can tell you from experience it's extremely capable of both. That's one of the things I love about this brand and why they're consistently one of my favourites over the past few years. Ross, the brand owner, doesn't try to confuse or overcomplicate things. If a product can do multiple jobs, he won't try and rebottle watered down versions of it with 3 different labels and feed customers a load of waffle. He'll just tell you what it can do, sell it to you in the most concentrated form possible and let you decide what way you want to use it. But back to the product, and you can see that as well as reacting with the oxidized fallout particles, it also has a visible foaming action. This has a couple of benefits, the first being that as a foam it tends to stay wetter for longer, allowing more working time, particularly in warmer conditions. And the second benefit is when it comes to using the product specifically as a reactive wheel cleaner, this foaming offers both visual assistance and some lubrication to help prevent damaging delicate finishes. Cortisol, on the other hand, might be what you'd call a more traditional foliage remover. You spray it onto the bodywork and it reacts almost instantaneously with the embedded fallout particles. I don't think I've ever used a product that reacts faster, and although as I stated earlier, the reaction time doesn't necessarily mean anything from an effectiveness point of view, it gives the user immediate confidence that they're getting the desired results. So we have two different products that behave in two completely different ways, carrying out the same job and achieving the same results. One might react a bit quicker, whereas the other continues to react for a lot longer, but the end result's going to be the same. So what I like to do at this stage, before rinsing the foliage removers from the bodywork, is to coat them with some SNOWFOAM, which I find reactivates them, helps encapsulate any fallout which has reacted to stop it drying back into the paint, and it just makes it easier to rinse everything away. It may not be a necessary step, and I might be a bit mad, but it's how I like to do it. And for anyone that's interested, this is also a great way to get that raspberry ripple effect that's so popular on social media. And you can see here on the door handles that this SNOWFOAM method actually helps spread the product into areas it might not have reached when just being sprayed from a trigger bottle. So maybe I'm not so mad after all. So after a few minutes, and more importantly before it starts to dry in, it's time to get everything rinsed off. I'm sure you'll agree that the car really is starting to look brand new again, but there is still the matter of that overspray to deal with, so I think now is the time to get the clay bar out. So as the overspray feels significant but not excessive, I've decided to use Bilthamber's regular clay, pre-cut in 2 thumb-sized pieces, which should be more than enough for this pint-sized car. And if you've never used a clay bar before, my first bit of advice is to leave it in a bucket of warm water for at least 5 to 10 minutes before you start, but longer the better, as this will soften the clay up and make it more workable, otherwise it'd be nearly impossible to use. Now when it comes to deciding on a clay lubricant, there's no right or wrong choice as it purely comes down to personal preference. So today I've decided to try something different, which is Smooth Velvet from Autoglance, a QD/spray wax/clay lubricant. Their words, not mine. Now this is the first time I'd used a dedicated clay lube, as I normally just use a QD diluted between 5 and 10%, but I had a sample bottle of this product and decided to see what it was like. Being a sample bottle, instructions were naturally limited, so after checking the Autoglance website, it states that for clay lube it should be diluted at 3 to 1 or 25%. Now personally I don't like too much lubrication when I'm claying, as in my opinion that defeats the purpose. A lubricant is essentially a liquid barrier between two solid surfaces, but the clay has to make contact with the contamination in order to remove it. So if you have too much lubrication, the clay will essentially float above the bodywork and won't be as effective. On the flip side, if you have no lubrication, the clay will grip the paint and you won't be able to use it. Now I've heard some people just use water, but that doesn't work for me, as water has too low a viscosity to offer enough lubrication. Essentially, well for me anyway, it just grips the paintwork and I drop the clay. And dropped clay is about as much use as a glass hammer. So like I said, my personal preference is for a QD diluted between 5 and 10%, but today I'm going to give this smooth velvet a go at the recommended 25. So let's get on with it. Now after the clay's been in the warm water for a few minutes, you can see how much easier it is to work with. Don't get me wrong, it's not like you're kneading pizza dough, but you can mould and flatten it to the desired shape and size. For me, I like to shape it so that I can use all 4 fingers, as I find I can control it better that way. And once you're happy, grab your lube and crack on. And don't be afraid to use a lot of product here. Again, another reason why I prefer a heavily diluted lube, as then it behaves more like a drying aid when it comes to rinsing it off at the end, as opposed to a spray and rinse sealant. Now this is where the satisfaction of using a clay bar comes in. Just listen to the difference when you go back over the same areas. And after you've done each section, whether that's a quarter of a bonnet or even half with a car this size, inspect the clay and see just how much you're removing. Then fold it in half, but only once, and that way you'll always be working with a clean piece of clay. So I've saved you from the boredom of watching me clay the entire car. The process is fairly simple once you know what you're doing, and whilst the results can be really satisfying and certainly noticeable, it's not the most exciting job in the world. So once finished, I like to give the car one final coat of SNOWFOAM. This helps to reactivate any dried in liquids and remove any residue from the claying process. You can probably see as it's being rinsed that there are some visible signs of protection now, a result of using what is essentially a spray wax diluted to 25% as a clay lube. This again is why I prefer a much weaker solution, but it's not going to cause any issues for this particular job. Once rinsed, it's finally time to dry the car off using yet another favourite product of mine, my Autobrite Direct Ultimate Drying Towel, and get it ready for the finishing stages. And now that it's all dried off, you can take a look at what's still to come in the 4th and final episode. So with all this to look forward to and more, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, ask you if there's anything you'd like to comment to leave it below, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care.